All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A researcher is studying how long it takes participants to complete a puzzle after specific types of observation and training. The researcher will start a stopwatch when the participant begins and stop it when the puzzle is finished. They do this each time the participants attempt the puzzle. This is an example of measuring what? So we have a measurement question, and it's a fairly straightforward measurement question. When we're looking at measurement, we want to consider a couple things. Are we continuously measuring or discontinuously measuring? And then are we measuring, let's say, a count or a length of time? In this case, the researcher is measuring a length of time, how long to complete a puzzle. And this researcher is continuously measuring this because every time the participant begins and then when they stop it, the researcher is measuring that entire length of the activity. So the researcher is starting the stopwatch at the beginning of the puzzle and then stopping it when the puzzle is finished. The researcher is measuring a discrete response and how long that discrete response is taking. So when we measure how long a discrete response takes, what are we measuring? A, repeatability. Repeatability is more related to a count. We're not counting here, we're measuring a length of time. B, temporal extent is associated with duration, and we are measuring duration. Again, duration is the measurement of a discrete response and how long that discrete response takes or lasts. So each time the researcher is measuring how long the puzzle takes to complete, they're measuring duration or the temporal extent. Temporal locus is inter-response time and latency. We're not measuring time in between anything here, so it's not temporal locus. And then partial interval data. We know this is continuous because the researcher is measuring the full length of the puzzle every time the puzzle is attempted. So what are we measuring here? B, temporal extent. The call center manager is concerned about frequent non-urgent calls from coworkers to IT support. A behavior analyst suggests providing a general email tip or helpful reminder about IT to all employees at fixed intervals, once every 3 hours, regardless of whether a call was made or not, with the aim of reducing non-urgent calls. Which outcome would best demonstrate that this time-based schedule was effective? So we have a lot going on here. We're not going to jump to the answer choices. We always attack the question. Question wants to know how or what will demonstrate that the time-based schedule was effective. How do we know it worked? Well, what is a time-based schedule? The time-based schedule is a fixed interval of every 3 hours giving a tip or reminder. And when we use time-based schedules, where we're using it as an antecedent strategy, we're typically trying to manipulate a motivating operation. In this case, the call center manager is concerned about the frequent non-urgent calls, and he wants to reduce those non-urgent calls. So we are going to know this outcome is, or the schedule is effective if we can somehow reduce these non-urgent calls. So let's look at A. The number of calls remain the same, but employees acknowledge the reminders. Well, A might signal they're getting the reminders, but it's not changing the behavior, and the number of calls are remaining the same. So it's not really going to be the best way to demonstrate the schedule was effective. B, non-urgent calls decrease immediately, but temporarily after each email tip is sent. Well, if our calls decrease immediately, that's good, but temporarily, we really want this to be a permanent thing. So B is somewhat effective, but can we do better? C, non-urgent calls gradually decrease over time permanently. Yeah, C is going to be better than B. We don't want just that immediate decrease that is temporary. We would like to see a permanent change. Now, with an antecedent strategy, and we're manipulating MOs, yes, typically that's going to be a temporary shift. But if we're looking at another choice where they have now decreased permanently, that's going to be better than B. And then D, there is an increase in urgent calls following the start of the email tips. Well, of course, we don't want to see an increase in those calls. We want to see a decrease in the non-urgent calls And it's going to be best if it's permanent. A group of teenagers are watching a popular dance trend on TikTok. As they watch the video, they attempt to recreate the dance sequence together. They do this several times until they feel they are ready to make their own TikTok. What is most represented in this scenario? All right, so think about this scenario. We have teenagers, they're watching popular dances on TikToks, and as they're watching it, they're recreating the dance sequence together. Immediately, we're thinking imitation or observation or learning. And what is the main difference? With imitation, it's immediate. The behavior is immediately copied. Observational learning, there's typically time in between whatever was observed and then the behavior later. These teenagers are watching the video, and as they're watching the video, they're recreating the dance sequence together. It's very immediate. They're imitating several times until they're ready to make their own. So what is most represented in this scenario? Well, A, imitation. Again, B, observational learning would be, let's say the teenagers watch the dance on TikTok, and then later that week, they go to school and do the dance. That's more observational learning than imitation. C, shaping. We're not sure how the shaping is working, if there's shaping going on. We can't say with certainty, so C is out. And then D, modeling. Well, modeling isn't necessarily represented. Is the TikTok video a model? Potentially, and likely because they're imitating it. But what is most represented in the scenario are the teenagers imitating the dance they're watching. So what is most represented in the scenario is A, imitation. Pretty straightforward question, but we still need that best answer. Lisa, an occupational therapist, is working in a busy outpatient clinic. She wants to measure a client's pacing during a treadmill session, but only has time to check periodically due to schedule constraints. Given Lisa's limited availability, which measurement procedure would be most feasible to capture the critical dimension of the treadmill behavior? So we have another measurement question, and we're trying to measure what? Well, the critical dimension of the treadmill behavior, which we believe is the pacing. And what do we know about Lisa? We know she's busy. She only has time to check periodically when this client is on the treadmill, and limited availability. All those things are telling you what? Well, we are likely going to pick a discontinuous measurement procedure. Continuous measurement means continuous, right? If we're going to continuously measure behavior, we've got to observe every single one every single time. If it's in a situation you have limited availability, limited time, like Lisa, let's pick a more discontinuous approach. So A, continuous duration recording. That might be good, but she's not just going to be able to do that consistently. We know she's too busy. So what about B, partial interval recording? Even with partial interval recording, and we know the behavior only has to happen a split second for it to count, you still have to be there watching the entire time. So checking periodically is not going to be effective at partial interval recording. C, momentary time sampling. With momentary time sampling, what is the good part about momentary time sampling? Well, let's say our start of the interval is here and the end is here. You only have to check at the very end of the interval. That's why it's momentary. This is probably best for Lisa, given her constraints. Remember, ideally, when we want to continuously measure, we've got to know our resource and our time constraints and pick what's going to meet our goals the best. And then D, rate recording. Rate, again, is continuous. So regardless of any other information we have, we can't be rate recording. It's not going to be effective. We can't continuously measure this treadmill session. Best way to measure given this information is C, momentary time sampling. A teenager is learning to use public transportation to get around the city. While boarding a bus, they hesitate when it is time to pay to ride the bus. The behavior analyst says, insert your card into the slot. Over time, the analyst plans to reduce the prompt to just saying card to help the teenager become more independent. What is likely the primary objective of fading the prompt in this manner? So we have a fading the prompt question. And what are we trying to do when we fade the prompt? Well, if we think about a three-term contingency, well, SD, response, consequence. When I say three-term, I mean the standard. When we add a prompt, right, this prompt is acting as a what? Well, it's acting as a temporary SD. So when we fade the prompt, we're actually transferring stimulus control to the real SD. So we have a teenager using public transportation, and the problem is when they get to the point where they need to pay, the behavior analyst has to prompt them by saying, enter your card into the slot. They're now trying to or planning to reduce the prompt to card. What would be the ultimate goal? Well, eventually, just that the teenager gets on the bus, sees the slot, and puts the card in. So, what is the primary objective here? A, to make sure the teenager is able to memorize the correct steps to get on the bus. That's not the objective of fading the prompt. We're also not going to use something like memorize when describing skill acquisition. B, to transfer stimulus control to the card slot. Yes, we are trying to transfer stimulus control from the prompt to the SD. In this case, the prompt is the verbal prompt, and we want the SD to just be that card slot. Time to pay, go ahead and pay, no prompt needed. C, to increase the use of less intrusive prompts with the teenager. We're not trying to increase anything. We're not trying to increase prompts here. We're trying to reduce prompts. D, to interrupt the behavior chain and evoke a novel response. This is not a behavior chain interruption strategy. It's a simple prompting strategy. Behavior analyst is providing that verbal prompt for the teenager to know when to pay. Now they're trying to fade out the verbal prompt where the SD just becomes either the slot or getting onto the bus. Primary objective likely is to transfer stimulus control to the card slot. Thanks for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.